As summer's coming to an end, we're slowly getting closer to the end of second season of Obscure Amiga Games series. Other than this one, there's still 3 episodes left, so let's not waste any more time and see what's in the store for today. Ziriax is an arcade horizontally scrolling sci-fi themed shoot 'em up and an Amiga exclusive. And as shooters go, it's actually pretty decent. The graphics are really nice and colorful and the sprites are detailed. While the backgrounds are not spectacular in any sense of the word, they are okay and most importantly, they do not crash with the foreground, which is a case for many of those less known bullets viewers out there, so you should not have any issues distinguishing enemy shots or even enemies themselves from it. There are 5 average length levels in the game and each ends with a boss fight. These are all very unique and require a bit different approach to beat, but are nowhere near comparable in quality to the best in the genre. Still, plowing through hundreds of enemies and then bosses spraying bullets all around is fun in this one despite that. There's 6 upgrades in the game which you can pick from orbs left by defeated enemies, and within those there are some staples of the genre like satellite ships helping you in your fight, backwards shot or even missiles. The balancing of the levels is a bit all over the place and not always the next one is noticeably more demanding than the previous, but that's really not a big issue if you're a fan of shooters. What is a little pain, however, at least in my eyes, is the bottom bar of the screen that sits there all the way through the game. It displays the game title and names of coder and graphics designer. I mean, I get that they might have wanted to reduce the gameplay window to keep the game running fluid, but they could have put anything in there. A lady in swimsuit, an alien munching on a human head, picture of a picture of a picture that depicts a picture of a picture. Anything other than this self-serving bullshit. I'm Batman. What the hell? Oh, okay, sorry. Manbot's telling me to ease up on the curses, so yeah. Ziriax is a good game, not great but definitely good, and the issue I have with it is very personal, so if you're not touched in a head the way I am, hunt it down and give it a go cause it's worth it. Zombie Apocalypse 2 is not an ambitious title, it doesn't overwhelm you with its story, it's not bothering you with overly complicated tasks to perform in each stage, and it does not require you to give it your full attention. In fact, you can play it with one hand, eating soup with another. Or fries. I'm in a mood for fries now, dammit. It's a 10-15 minutes kind of a game that capitalizes on popularity of gore-filled titles like Mortal Kombat, not offering comparable depth of features. You fire it up when either thinking what other title to invest more time in, to let off some steam mindlessly killing thousands of zombies, or when you literally have just few minutes and desperately want to play something. And truth be told, it doesn't fail in any of those scenarios. It is, however, not a game that you'd like to spend the whole afternoon immersing yourself in, as there's no meat on the bones here really. Bad pun, I know, let's move on. You pick it up, you shoot some zombies, covering the screen with hundreds of rotting body parts and bucketfuls of blood, and then you move on to something better. If approached like that, you'll have no problem enjoying it in those short occasional bursts. Now, as you can clearly see, it's an Operation Wolf kind of a game, where you control a crosshair exterminating the zombies as they wander about the screen. The left mouse button shoots the gun and right throws the grenades. Both are limited in number, so whenever you see extra supplies falling from the sky, don't hesitate to shoot them as they will restock these. The game is that simple, in each level you get X number of enemies to kill, and when you do, it's straight to the next stage. Rinse and repeat, and then get bored with it. As someone who quite honestly can't play Operation Wolf or Cabal for too long, as I lose interest in their loop quickly, I'm not loving Zombie Apocalypse 2. It's far more repeatable than the 2 classics. But I can appreciate it for what it is, which is short, mindless fun and nothing more. Zone Warrior is a side-scrolling action shooter platformer with some very basic exploration and gameplay that feels as if it was originally planned for an 8-bit machine like C64 or NES. Or maybe it's just me not appreciating it for what it is. Who knows? Anyway, story-wise, in 30th century, Earth was invaded by the aliens known as geeks. We're lucky here, guys, cause if it was nerds, we'd be done for. But since we've managed to draw them off, no doubt with your help, my dear viewer, cause your heroic acts are well known throughout the universe, they decided a different approach was necessary to destroy us. And no, they did not go for flooding the market with mediocre games, driving millions of gamers to ritualistic self-sacrifices. Not the case here whatsoever. They stole a prototype time machine and ventured into different periods of past with a plan to disrupt our technological development so that we would be an easier kill in the future. So, the present from which the story started off. As stupid as alien plans go, it's not the worst. I mean, it didn't consider splitting timelines when things change and creation of alternative parallel timelines either for that matter, but whatever, it's just a game, right? So they went into 5 periods: prehistoric, Egyptian, medieval, Japanese and future. And while I can understand Egyptian meaning ancient, I have no clue what Japanese is supposed to be here. Each of those timelines/levels features appropriately themed enemies and hazards and sees you running around killing buddies and saving hostages, like damsels in distress for instance. All that with your trusty weapon that can be upgraded to 3- and 5-way shot or swapped for a flamethrower for a maximum damage output. Each of the levels is quite big actually, consisting of many separate screens interconnected by doors and gates, and to complete them you'll have to find and rescue a certain number of captives, and then defeat the geek commander, which if I wouldn't see the game I could have only imagined as this white shirt tucked in dude with 3 pencils sticking out of his shirt's chest pocket and a huge steel retainer permanently mounted in his jaw. Anyway, the commander is always hidden behind the key-locked door, so you must find the key first to be able to destroy him. Zone Warrior is not bad, but it's not great either. And while it's perfectly completable and the time you invest in it does not feel wasted, I still for whatever the reason can't shake the feeling that it was supposed to be an 8-bit game. And that during development at some point it was dropped and then quickly ported to 16-bit platform, changing nothing but graphics. It's not the case obviously, it just feels like that to me. Now, since we've covered few decent or even good games, let's tackle one stinker, and this one's so smelly, your eyes will bleed. Or ears, actually, but we'll circle back to that. Yolanda is interesting not only because it's largely unknown, but also because it released on 8 and 16-bit systems at the same time, differing a bit between them. On smaller machines it was called Hercules and featured, well, him. And on 16-bit machines you play as Yolanda, apparently Hercules' daughter. My best bet here for why the name's different is that on 8-bit systems, where character was just few pixels in size, it made no difference how it looked like, and more recognizable name, preferably someone known for strength and agility, was more appropriate to lure gamers in. While on big machines, they've bet on making a protagonist barely clothed, big-chested blonde and drive the sales based on that. Since Yolanda's featured in this obscure games video, it's clear that even massive boobies cannot save something that is a torture to play. And it is. In theory, Yolanda is a single-screen platformer in which you have to get to the exit of each screen ASAP, avoiding all the environmental hazards and various enemies. In theory. In practice, it's a nightmare built on terrible level design, generic, blunt and boring enemies randomly showing and disappearing platforms requiring you to remember which are which, and lackluster gameplay. And if that was not enough, the music is the worst I've heard on the Amiga and perhaps on all systems. It just never stops. It continues drilling a finger-sized hole in your brain with repeatable single sound or two that just goes on and on and on forever. Numbing you to all the pains and troubles of existence. I mean, just listen. After a while, when the hole's big enough that you can stick a big toe in it, you stop caring. You begin to enjoy it, your pain receptors grew accustomed to this initially painful and now calming drumroll of distraction, the experience. Yes, you will go out and start killing everyone, everywhere. Just one more screen. I'm Batman. Wait, what? Oh my god. I may have been shitting on you, buddy, for what seems like dozens of videos, and I'm sorry. You literally saved me just now. I don't know what happened. This game, this abomination. Guys, do not play Yolanda. It's a mind control tool. It's gonna brainwash you. You'll be capable of everything after getting yourself lost in it. I repeat, do not play Yolanda. You know what? I never imagined I might ever have to say it, but Yolanda may be as bad as Pro Soccer 2190 is. Released late in Amiga's life in 1997, The World of Magic is a system-exclusive point-and-click adventure and an average game at best from a technical point of view. But compared to Yolanda, it's a masterpiece. The game is set in magical world of Kawamoon and you play as Grandon, a teenage wizard wannabe. When your home village is raided by goblins and no one comes to the rescue, along with all other villagers that survived, you're forced to flee your home and embark on a quest to find a real wizard who will teach you in the arts of magic. It's been pointed out on Lemon Amiga website in the comments section under this game that it may have been made using shareware tool called Grill. G-R-I-L-L, Grill. Wow, it's a spelling contest video now or what? Anyway, I can believe that there were some publicly available tools used to make it, as from a presentation point of view, so graphics and sounds, it's way below what was a standard on the Amiga 3-4 years earlier. You know, presentation is hardly what makes or breaks the game. Fortunately, the gameplay is all there, and the World of Magic is not bad. If you're a fan of the genre, it's definitely worth tracking and completing, especially that some of the dialogues are just hilarious. In fact, it's chock full of funny, often over-the-top crazy exchanges between the characters and edgy humor. But it definitely shouldn't be anyone's first point-and-click game, as it's very rough, unpolished and generally speaking uneven game. For adventure game newbies, personally I'd recommend something from LucasArts. Anyway, most puzzles are inventory-based and they're not overly demanding, and while the game is not a looker, the aforementioned dialogues are really what it's all about, as when you read few of them, you'll want to complete the game just to enjoy the shits and giggles, if nothing else. And you should, as it's not a big time investment and can be completed in about an hour or two at most. Wizard's Castle, but not as in castle belonging to a wizard, but plural, Wizard's Castle, is not only weirdly named, but also terrible Amiga exclusive. I know, we had Yolanda already and I should really spare you, but perhaps by knowing about it, you will save yourself from trying it out on one of those lazy winter evenings. So, let's assume that I'm talking about it for your own good. Or at least I'll stick to that story. Anyway, Wizard's Castle is a flick screen platformer that is just awful. It doesn't look too bad, not especially interesting, true, but not bad in the most obvious meaning of the word. But the sound design of it is nearly as bad as that of Yolanda. I mean, just listen to the sound that the character makes whenever he picks up something. It's the same that he does when he's hit by an enemy. Overall, the game seems to have 3-4 different sound clips at most and use them for everything. Oh well, let's move on. Story-wise, it seems that it was supposed to be a wizard's castle, so castle belonging to a wizard, as you must venture into it, get to the wizard eventually, all the while defeating hundreds of his monsters of various kinds. Why would you need to get to him? Nobody knows, and I suppose we won't either, as I've not heard of anyone who actually managed to complete the game, for one reason or another, be it difficulty or overwhelming and quickly setting boredom. But what's even more interesting than the reason for invading of the castle is why did you decide that appropriate attire for such occasion would be a pair of speedos and nothing else? I mean, what do you expect to find when you get to the wizard? A magical oceanside sandy beach that's trapped in the 80s when people still wore these? Let me know in the comments below. There's no bad answers here. There's no good ones either, but I'm curious despite that. Kingsoft, the publisher of Wizard's Castle, was well known back then for dropping really bad games. And with this one, they did not disappoint. Or they did, depends on your point of view. Oh, and on a side note, the developer was also called Soft Touch, which may be the clue for solving the whole Speedos conundrum here. I don't know if you've ever played a game called Safari Guns. Wildlife is its spiritual successor and also a game that's odd but fun for a short while. There are 4 locations that you can pick between when starting: America, Arctic, India and Australia, and you're given a task of finding and photographing 3 rare animals in each. As you go about it, many other different animals would pop on the screen, but your only real goal is to immortalize the given 3 on film. Nothing more. The gameplay is in first-person perspective, like Operation Wolf, where you control a crosshair and must use it to take pictures. You can however switch between the camera and a gun, as you also have to shoot poachers. Now, I get it. I really do. We have to save the endangered species, blah blah blah. But shooting dudes straight up without a word of a warning or even trying to make them see the error of their ways? You're not as much of a hero as I always taken you for. You're cold, man. Cold. On the other hand, when I think about it, I get it. You're shooting them not only to protect the animals, but also yourself, as they will open fire at you willy-nilly as well, giving it no thought whatsoever. So, now, as I've mentally and verbally processed what's going on here, I'd like to apologize. I forgive you, and I am once again your as loyal supporter as I've always been. Short of a minute ago when I wasn't. Anyway, you've 2 cameras to pick from for close and far-off shots, the aforementioned gun for protection and a hand, with which you can pick up items like additional equipment or medipacks for healing. Sadly, despite being made by the same developer, Wildlife is just not as good as Safari Guns was. The original had simple but still present in the game progression, and in Wildlife, as soon as you manage to grab all the pictures required in a particular stage, you're moved straight back to the area selection screen, which is really anticlimactic. At least the graphics and especially the parallax scrolling is really nice, so that's what the game definitely has going for it. Wildlife is okay for a random 5-10 minutes play once every few years, but I wouldn't keep it at hand's reach distance as you're not gonna look for it often. Oh, and the gameplay you're watching is not my own. That's why someone's for whatever the reason just shooting everything. I suppose it could be played like that too, but it's just not the objective of the game, so... You know what we've not seen in a short while? Multidiscipline sports games. You know, ones like those from Epics. They were always fun and could easily as well make or break friendships over something silly like pole vault event or synchronized swimming. Enter Western games. And yes, you guessed it right, it's a multi-event game where you and a buddy or CPU can compete in 6 Wild West themed categories. First is arm wrestling, which requires very little explanation, just make sure that you win. Then there's beer shooting, which coincidentally is precisely what it's named. So you must shoot 5 beer glass targets faster than your opponent does. And since you're both intoxicated, crosshair is kinda flowing all over the place and the glasses are held by innocents, so yeah, be careful. Quit spitting is gentleman's sport. I bet this sentence has never been said aloud. Not to this day at least. Basically, you'll need to bite a chunk of tobacco, chew it to the right consistency, and then spit it out at the correct angle to hit your opponent's spit bucket. Fun. The milking is milking cows. You saw it in the olden movies, so just give it your best and pull on them I should really be careful what I say here, shouldn't I? Dancing is as stupid as in most other games that feature it, but what you must do is perform complicated and carpal tunnel-inducing movements of the joystick to follow a dance routine. It's not fun, but I suppose most of these multi-events games had one discipline that was not as good as the others. Finally, there's eating competition and something I actually could participate in real life, because bacon is life. Don't quote me on that. So you have to dip the spoon in the stew, raise it up balancing it not to spill, slurp the stew, chew, swallow, drink and rinse and repeat to completion. Wow, that sounds bad, somehow. I'm leaving it here anyway as Manbot's got enough on his plate and really doesn't need me to add on to it. As weird sports games go, Western games is quite novel, but clunky and incredibly difficult to master controls make it a pain to play most of the time, as it feels that you're competing more with controls than your opponent really. So approach it if neither of you played it, it's fun then when no one knows what and how to do. It's not very often that we get to see a racing game that tries to lean towards the simulation as opposed to arcade and in the same time presents its action from a top-down view and not from the cockpit. Warm-Up is just that. It's a Formula 1 racing simulation wannabe with a very unusual for the genre viewpoint. You can play it in training, single race or whole season, and obviously the last option is the one that's most fun. You get to pick between 8 different cars, varying a bit in stats, especially acceleration and top speed, and you have to compete on 16 based on real-life Formula 1 racing tracks in linear order. As you race along those devilishly difficult stages, you'll be able to customize other particularities of your bolide to best suit your playstyle and skill level, so tires, spoilers, damper and steering sensitivity. And you can do it between the races or during in pit stops. Warm-Up is quite demanding and often a single mistake can cost you a whole race, so the racing is tense and exciting. Sadly, the graphics are a little below what we'd expect from the Amiga in 1991, but they're not bad enough to detract from playing. It's worth noting though that personally I'd prefer if there was a bit more distinguishable difference between the cars on the track, as they all seem samey after a while. Sounds are quite decent actually, especially the engines, so I'm not gonna complain about those at all. Warm-Up is a game that requires a time investment. It's not gonna appeal to racing game lovers straight away as they will first have to learn how to tackle its controls, which at times tend to feel a bit sensitive. This can be adjusted, but the feeling never really goes away until you get used to it. But in the same time, it rewards smart play rather than all-out pedal-to-the-metal approach. So in the long run, you'll be much better driver slowing down before the turns rather than trying to keep maximum speed at all times. If it sounds like something for you, then by all means, give it a go. It can be quite fun. Wanted is a tad above average 2008 sci-fi movie with Angelina Jolie and also a western-themed vertically scrolling shoot-em-up on the Amiga. Coincidentally, also a tiny bit above average. It may not be as well known or as good as original it is clearly based on, so Gunsmoke, but it's definitely not bad for a session or two of cowboy shooting bonanza. I had to, I know it's a bad pun, but I couldn't help myself. Anyway, you play as bounty hunter who's on the trail of 4 villains, all to bring them to justice, and obviously earn their bounties in the process. Cause in the Wild West, nothing is free. Apart from death. Death is. Could actually die in dozens of ways. From like a scorpion sting, poisonous plant, heat, random bullet, Indian raiding party arrow. There was a lot of circumstances that could bring a demise at no extra cost. Still, you play Wanted for the bounties. You can choose to pursue them in any order you'd like, and when all are eventually dealt with, the 5th bounty emerges and he's the last and the final challenge of the game. It's obviously good to shoot random barrels on your way, cause everyone who've played any other Western team game knows that they always contain pickups. And they do in Wanted too. Quite often they're helpful items like boots for extra speed of movement, rifle for increased shot range, shield for, well, shield, and whatever you might think about it in the heat of the moment, do not pick up the skull, as it ends as bad as in most other games where they can be picked up. You're also armed with dynamite, which functions like the bomb in the most other shooters, regardless of their name, and just clears the screen of enemies entirely. Graphics are not bad, but also nothing to impress in any way, and sounds are okay, even if they quickly become repeatable. Can't complain about it though, as you can't really expect much more from the shooter, right? Despite not having an official port to the Amiga, Gunsmoke is Wanted's biggest problem, because it exists and comparisons between the two are unavoidable. If there was no original, Wanted could have easily been more popular and well known, as it's a decent playing and looking title that the only real issue I might have with is its difficulty, which is definitely not what you'd call demanding. We've went through 10 really odd games today, guys. What are your thoughts about them? Think any of them are worth more recognition than they received? Or perhaps you'd like to thank me for saving your life, cause now you know to avoid Yolanda. Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't worry about the whole Yolanda shebang, I might have saved you here today, but you've saved the universe more times than I could count, so... If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.